and if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, and it is now time for our weekly joint live stream. It's 10 a.m. on the East Coast of the United States, so it's very, very early. And it means also everybody down. Peter said the other day, you've already had time to make your coffee. It's too late. That's it. You can't make any coffee now. You have to stay glued to your laptop. So it's now time for the live stream. So get your pencils, make notes. There'll be a test afterwards. Peter, how are you?
I just found out what groiper meant.
Yes, so did I.
Even on a podcast I watched a couple of days ago, the host of the podcast said, "So, what does this word mean?" And the person that was being interviewed didn't answer the question, which really frustrated me because I thought, "Well, I don't know what it means," but the interviewee he understood it was, but went on to another point very quickly, and it was very frustrating for me. So, I asked George just a few minutes ago to enlighten me. And so now I have a rough idea.
Yeah, but I only knew because I looked it up on ChatGPT, and it informed me about this frog, Groiper frog, who was apparently the heir apparent to Pepe the Frog. So now we know what that means. There's a few things that we can talk about. We complained a little while ago that we're not going to have Stoltenberg to kick around anymore because he left and decided to become finance minister. He was going to be head of the central bank, but apparently he's the finance minister of Norway. And we were kind of lamenting because what are we going to do now? We don't have Stoltenberg to kick around anymore. And but now we've got another opportunity. We can kick Stoltenberg around some more because he's got a new book out, and his memoirs. And in his memoirs, he is as fatuous and as completely useless as one had been led to believe. So the Times of London has published a kind of short excerpts from his memoirs, and it's clear that he hasn't really learned a great deal from what had transpired. So here is this.
What is the phrase? He has forgotten a lot and learned nothing.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, yes, he's learned nothing and forgot nothing. So here is this the story, and the headline is Stoltenberg feared NATO would collapse under his leadership.
Well, that's a very interesting title. I mean, because of him?
No, I think it was because of Trump. Trump in his first term. And he was actually very anxious as to what Trump was going to do, whether he was going to cut off funding to NATO.
Well, George, you and I know that was never going to happen.
Of course, it was never going to happen.
Again, these people are fabulists, okay, and it's a way to sell, pulp fiction like this.
Yes, exactly. But they want to create this drama that Trump was going to walk out of NATO, and we're all panicking. It was never going to happen. He was always wanting to pressure NATO to cough up more money. That was always the goal. But he says here, NATO's former Secretary General has described the painful moment in February 2022 when he refused President Zelensky's desperate plea to impose a no-fly zone over Ukraine. Stoltenberg said he feared their conversation might be the last phone call the president would make. We all feared for the life of President Zelensky and his family. He said, he called me from a bunker in Kiev with Russian tanks just up the road, and he said, I accept you're not sending in NATO ground troops, though I disagree, but please close the airspace, prevent the Russian planes, drones, and helicopters from flying and attacking us. So he's pleased to Stoltenberg. And then Stoltenberg says, well, and Zelensky says, well, I know NATO can do it because they've done it before. And he pointed to Bosnia-Herzegovina in the 1990s. and then he talked about Iraq and the Kurds, which also took place in the 1990s. Now, of course, the issue there was, well, in one case, you're facing Serbia. NATO is, of course, very brave when it comes to Serbia. And of course, the other case was that wasn't NATO, that was just the United States. The United States could easily handle Saddam, very much weakened Saddam Hussein in the 1990s. So he said, yeah, do this for me, would you? And Stoltenberg said he had told Zelensky, I understand why you're asking for this, but it will not happen because if NATO is going to close the airspace of Ukraine, the first thing we have to do is take out Russian air defense systems in Belarus and Russia, as we cannot fly in over Ukrainian airspace with Russian air defense missiles targeting NATO planes. And then it says, and if there is a Russian plane or helicopter in the air, we have to shoot it down, and then we are in full war between NATO and Russia. And we're not willing to do that. As Biden, who was US president at the time, put it, we will not risk a third world war for Ukraine.
Yeah, but he was willing to risk the existence of Ukraine.
That's exactly right. So that's very interesting. So you've drawn this conclusion, right? So the next step is, well, if you're not going to risk world war on behalf of Ukraine, then you need to work out some kind of an accommodation immediately, because it doesn't make any sense. I mean, if you don't want to fight Russia because it's too damn strong, then as sure as hell Ukraine can't fight Russia because it's too damn strong. Then you should say, well, let's work out an accommodation. But interesting enough, Stoltenberg does not draw that conclusion. So he draws, yes, we're not going to fight Russia on your behalf. We're not going to get hurt. We're not going to have missiles landing in our cities. But it's okay for you to have Russian missiles landing in your cities. And we will go on encouraging you to
Yeah, we'll hold your beer. Go right ahead. Okay.
Exactly. Hold your beer. That's right. So,
but this is so patently obvious, okay? And that's why in the future, what were the motivations when you know that a military victory is not possible? So why continue it?
Yeah,
okay.
That's right.
Or is it because of your own personal interests, the interests of the people around you? You can look at how the regime change wars that the U.S. has conducted in NATO is that they buy people off. They'll helicopter people. I mean, maybe there is an exit for Zelensky and his crowd here, but not for Ukraine. So, I mean, this whole caper never had Ukraine's interest in mind. There were other interests: a weakened Russia, strategic defeat of Russia. Okay,
right.
Yeah, the thing. But Ukraine was never front and center. It still isn't.
No, that's right, and that's really what is so intriguing about that, because of course the responsible thing is when somebody says, "Well, I'm gonna go and fight a hopeless fight. You have to help me." Then the responsible person will say, "No, I'm not going to help you because it's just going to lead to your destruction, and I'm not going to help lead to your complete destruction." And that was the view of previous administrations. I mean, why did Eisenhower decide that he wasn't going to help Hungary in 1956, or Johnson, he wasn't going to help Czechoslovakia in 68? In other words, they were saying, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to go on resisting. I mean, it's just, it really, this is a hopeless fight. We're not going to go and risk our own lives for you. So therefore, the best thing is for you to work something out.
And that will work well. There was something already on the table to work out. Prior to the start of the SMO, there was the Minsk process. Now, as flawed as it was, how one-sided it was certainly not in Russia's interests, okay? Right. But you had that on the table. Immediately after the start of the conflict, there was another option here. So, I mean, this shows just the lack of strategic vision, certainly the lack of the national interest of Ukraine, and then as we go down the road, the national interest of member states of NATO. I mean,
but that's the interesting thing. Yeah. But that's the interesting thing, because you say lack of strategic vision, unless that strategic vision was precisely
that is the strategic vision,
exactly,
right.
And that's the dishonesty of it, because he won't admit this. So as we go on, I mean, I don't have a copy of the book. I mean, I think at some point we'll get the copy of the book, and then
Well, no, we'll get some kind of gray market PDF. Okay.
exactly. And so it says, then Stoltenberg does his usual thing. Oh, had NATO provided more military support to Ukraine when Putin annexed Crimea, he said, Russia's full-scale invasion 8 years later could have been prevented.
What does
Um,
that even mean,
doesn't mean
George?
anything. It doesn't mean anything other than just to dump on his predecessor,
Yeah,
who was
exactly.
Rasmussen.
Well, I mean, it's so dumping on Rasmussen. Oh, that's nice and fine, but was it in the geopolitical interests of NATO and the United States to go to war over Crimea? Really? No. The,
What
the
is
calculation was no, and
exactly?
that was the right one. And oh, by the way, I'm sure Stoltenberg, this guy's not the sharpest knife in the drawer. Why did what? Why did Crimea return to Russia? Because there was a coup in Kiev in
Yeah,
February of
exactly.
2014. I'm sure he doesn't mention that.
I don't exactly. I haven't seen the book, but I dare say that he'll just make a passing mention, if that.
Yes,
Um,
something happened
yeah,
in Kiev in February of
yeah, but
2000.
it's never. It's just they took Crimea. Declining to provide Zelensky with air power was part of what Stoltenberg described as NATO's contradictory approach to. He loves this contradictory paradox. He talks about this paradox, contradictory approach to helping Ukraine. Oh, what's the contradictory
Yeah, but
approach?
what was? How do you helping Ukraine? Why don't we unpack that? Create a grift, a multi, hundreds of billions of dollars of a grift. And let's see how long it lasts. It's still going on right now.
Well,
Okay.
exactly. You see, the thing here is that they really don't care what it's doing to Ukraine. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it's just how many Ukrainians have been killed, how much has been destroyed, and for what? I mean, that's the thing. And for what? What have you accomplished other than that you've kept this war going against Russia? But ultimately, you still have to say, I don't know, however many have been killed, who knows what the real numbers are. But for what? It's a hopeless endeavor. So all these lives are lost for nothing. Then it says, on the morning of 24th of February, when the full-scale invasion happened, all nations met at NATO headquarters, and we made two decisions. One was to step up our support for Ukraine, as we did. The other was to do what we could to prevent this war from escalating beyond Ukraine and become a full-scale war between Russia and
So,
NATO.
so you light a house on fire in the neighborhood. You do it. You're the arsonist, and
Right.
then we got to make sure we got to protect the rest of the neighborhood. You started the fire.
That's right. Exactly. So again, he's saying, oh well, we're going to help do whatever it is for Ukraine to keep this war going, but we, however, are actually not going to get involved. We don't want to get hurt. Hey, I've got a nice life here. I have 3 meals a day. And I intend to go on to become the head of the central bank in Norway. I'm not going to jeopardize any of that, but we'll continue supporting Ukraine. I
Yeah,
mean, it's not a
but
contradictory approach. It's I can see your approach is very clear.
well,
Somebody
ob-
else is
ob-
doing your fighting for you.
obviously, and we've seen it. This is transparent. You don't have to look for it. Okay, this has started. Okay, we got what we wanted because this is all directed against Russia. So we're just going to wear them down. The sanctions that'll bag it. Kick them off the Swissism. That'll bag it. They'll
Right.
come. They'll come begging. See, this is the thinking. They're just saying, okay, all right, all right. Things that get a little broken in Ukraine. All right, okay. But the aim is how can we not only contain Russia but to weaken Russia. Lloyd Austin said this at the very beginning of the goal is to weaken Russia.
Yeah.
He said it, okay, at the very, very beginning. And so Ukraine, it's going to be tough, but
Yeah.
hang on because eventually the Russian side will collapse. Okay, I'll hold your beer. Go for it.
Right. Right. That's exactly right. And the interesting thing is, it's clear just from these excerpts that he thinks this we have to continue with this policy. This is the policy that he doesn't see any need for any change at all to this policy.
Sunk,
Um,
sunk cost fallacy.
that's it.
This is what
And
they
then
do.
so, and then he says here, of course, there's an element of contradiction in these goals. No, there isn't. It's very clear that your goals are, yeah, you do the fighting, we'll hold your jacket for you. Because if the only aim was to ensure that Ukraine prevailed, then we could have sent in NATO troops and air forces and fought on the battlefield. But we didn't do that. We didn't do that because we didn't want a full-scale war between Russia and NATO. Well, of course you didn't want to do it. So we sent weapons and ammunition. So basically, we just sent Ukrainians to their
Okay, so
to
we
their
want
death.
a war, but we just don't want to be in it. Okay,
Exactly. Well, of course,
exactly.
we're making a perfectly rational decision. We have a very nice life here, and we don't want to jeopardize that very nice life. But you see here there the irresponsibility of that, and that was not the decision that was made by previous leaders, as I say, when the United States previously had that issue, which is, hey, if we're not going to do this fighting, then I don't think you should either, because it makes very little sense. When it's basic Eisenhower, so in Hungary, this is an existential matter for the Soviet Union. They're not going to let Hungary go. Johnson did the same with Czechoslovakia. They're not going to. Reagan in 1980, or Carter and Reagan in 1980, 81 were basically said they were expecting a Soviet invasion of Poland. They weren't expecting the coup, but they were expecting a Soviet invasion, and already they made clear there was going to be no U.S. intervention to save Poland from the Soviet Union. So in other words, that's also a third and fourth U.S. president who made that decision, which was, in other words, don't waste your lives on a hopeless endeavor. This is an existential matter for the
Yeah,
Soviet.
but all along the promise of NATO membership, okay, but Ukraine will become a member of NATO. I mean, you have to go back to the coup of 2014. It was all about a European Association Agreement, and what effectively that was is that they wanted Ukraine to become what they call a EU aspirant. But if you look at the agreement, it's not to Ukraine's advantage. Okay, it was basically to privatize the entire country
Right,
and
right,
put all of the social costs on the state, which would be bankrupt. And Yanukovych saying, this just doesn't work. And the Russians say, no, you sign this, because what it would do, it would be, because Ukraine and Russia were in a customs union, so they could trade back and forth across the border. For people in the Donbass, there was no international border. People just walked across. I mean, why? Because they're in the same customs union. The association union said, no, 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 no. No, you have to start cutting off trade with Russia. You have to trade with us. There was nothing the European Union wanted to buy from Ukraine, so it would be in one direction, stripping them away. And the
right.
Russians, well, if you do sign it, then there's no customs union here. So
Yeah, there you go.
this is
Exactly.
something that's not to our advantage.
No,
And yet this was all behind design. Look at the appendices of the association agreement. It's basically NATO membership without membership.
exactly.
Okay.
That was exactly it. That was exactly it. And the during the time of this, they were negotiating the association agreement. Russia was saying, well, if you want to negotiate this has to be a tripartite negotiation:
Exactly.
EU, Ukraine, and Russia, precisely for what you just said. Basically, we have a free trade agreement with Ukraine. If Ukraine has a free trade agreement with the EU, then effectively we Russians have a free trade agreement with the EU. Well, we're not going to do that. I mean, they're just basically going to wipe out our own domestic industries, which of course is what they were after. So that we're not going to accept that. But the response of the EU was bought out. They gave a kind of a finger. This has nothing to do with you. This is a bilateral talks with Ukraine, and of course that's why they gave that offer essentially to Yanukovych. Hey, cut yourself off from Russia. That's why they said, hey, it's a civilizational thing. Are you with us, or are you with them? Are you with the West or with the East? Um, and then when Yanukovych said, this makes very little sense, boom, he was gone. And so,
Yeah, and you have to remember at the same time, the Russian side were giving them a $15 billion. How would you describe it as kind of a
a bridging loan.
Yeah, a bridge loan.
Yeah,
Like you're in trouble
bridging
right
loan.
now, and of course, after the coup, the Ukrainian side said, "No, you did this with Yanukovych," and the Russian side, "No, we did this with the Ukrainian state," and the
Right,
Russians won
right,
eventually. Okay,
right. But they yes, but it also led to the coup, and because
yep.
they were playing for keeps.
But
Uh,
I bet you Stoltenberg doesn't say anything about 2014 in his book. I haven't read the book, but I
yeah, no,
doubt he commented.
I would doubt it. Other than Crimea, that I'm sure that's all he really writes about. Um, but anyway, he then the this goes on and says here, this is quite interesting. Um, he compared the situation to the United States support for Britain at the start of the Second World War. The U.S. didn't want to be involved themselves, so they provided weapons but not troops. It was only after Pearl Harbor that the U.S. actually joined.
Oh, that's
That's
oh
very,
come
very
on.
interesting, because the U.S. was, of course, a de facto. U.S. was de facto aligned with Great Britain secretly. Roosevelt was very secretive. He was deceiving the American public about the extent of the American involvement with Britain. But knowing that if it was secret to the American people, it wasn't secret to the Germans. The Germans were very well aware of what the Americans were doing, and therefore he was consciously provoking Germany, essentially to attack American shipping. So when Pearl Harbor came, uh, FDR seized on that and then focused entirely on Germany, which itself was a remarkable thing. I mean, it was the Japanese who attacked the United States, but Roosevelt decided, oh well, we're going to focus our attention on Germany, not on the Far East. So the Japanese really had a free reign for the Japanese for about 1942, 43. So because basically Americans weren't doing anything about the Japanese, they were focusing on Germany. So there was deceit. And what is Stoltenberg saying? So eventually, but the Americans were wanting to get into the war. So is he saying that's what he's advocating now? Eventually, getting into the war against Russia?
Well, and also it was Nazi Germany declared war on the United States.
Declared that's right, but the declaration of war doesn't really mean anything. I mean, it's FDR still basically focused all of his resources on fighting Germany, not on Japan, but on Germany, and he'd been doing this secretly for 40 and 41. But the point is that what Stoltenberg has in mind? Oh well, we have arms, and then after Pearl Harbor, America was in directly. So that's the plan that you want to that NATO is going to get in directly.
And Roosevelt wanted to get into the
Yeah,
war.
yes, of course it is.
He needed casus belli to do it, and he got it. The
Right,
Japanese attack tried
right,
the pact that Hitler had with the Japanese, plus the declaration of war in the United States. He got everything he wanted, everything.
right. That's right. But it's still the question is that what Stoltenberg wants? Is that because
Oh,
if
of course he wants it.
that's
Of
right.
course
So
he
he
does.
used that. So he says, "Oh well, we did this, and
No, no, what? Yeah, yeah. No Norwegian troops necessary. Just get Americans to do it. Okay,
Exactly, and that's it. So,
exactly.
so he kind of blurts this out. He says, "Well, it was a paradox. It's a contradiction. We were helping
Oh no.
Ukraine, but we weren't going to get involved ourselves." And then says, "It's a little like what FDR and World War II. Yeah, but that was just preliminary to getting in directly, which is what FDR was violating U.S. law. He was secretly sending arms to Great Britain in violation of U.S. law. There were these neutrality laws precisely to prevent the United States getting involved in any more wars. He was violating
All
the law in order to get into that war.
It's all in the archives. It's well known if you want to learn about this. Okay, his correspondence with Churchill, all made public, as far as I know.
Right,
Maybe the super secret letters weren't released, but I mean, we know this. Okay,
right,
we know this.
right.
And so, Seltenberg, he's just a bald-faced liar. Okay, that's exactly what he is. And what is he? He trots around and he's got a little card in his pocket. Article 5, Article 5. And so he just can't wait to play that.
That's right. That's exactly that. What a
And the
stuff.
Russians wouldn't take the bait. Oh,
That's yeah.
that's how,
That's
that's
it.
how, that's how treacherous they are.
Now, I am sure that his entire book is dedicated about how fantastically clever we in the NATO have been in essentially. Well, we're helping Ukraine, and but we're not getting involved directly. But clearly, he blurts these things out. He has a tendency of blurting things out. That's always been his great weakness. Like he blurted out, we've been NATO's been in Ukraine from 2014 on. So,
Putin didn't want more NATO, but he got more NATO. Ha 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 ha.
Exactly. So he actually blurts out what this war is about. He said, yeah. So you're right. It has nothing to do with Putin wants to restore the Soviet Union and all this other nonsense that the NATO governments have been saying. He said, yeah, it was NATO's presence, and that you have been there since 2014. You've been building up Ukraine since 2014. Yeah. Well, how did you think Russia would react? You knew exactly this is how Russia would react to this. That's the point. That's what a provocation is. When you know how the other side is going to react and you keep doing it, that's known as provocation.
It's again, it's not recorded. It's extremely well known here where I am. Is the very vicious what they called anti-terrorist operation against the people of the Donbass, in which 14,000 people were killed. Does anybody know that from Western media? Is it ever mentioned ever? Okay, it's just like Putin woke up one day, and attacked. No, is this Stoltenberg is correct in saying what happened is there was this anti-terrorist operation, and the Ukrainian military got clobbered. I mean, big time clobbered. Okay, essentially, and that's when they sued for peace. That's what started the Minsk process, where they bided their time. We know that from Hollande. We know that from Angela Merkel, and an intensive NATOization of Ukraine. And if you look, and again, I'll repeat myself, but it's worth it. People say, if Russia's so strong, why is it, it's so slow? Well, it was on the Donbass is where the most NATOization was going on. Bases, depots, defense measures. It's all there. And as we speak right now, that's essentially been annihilated. Now there's an open field. Okay. Now George and I'm not going to make fools out of ourselves by being military guys, but that's what people don't understand is that the Russian side has decided to destroy the Ukrainian military. It doesn't need land. The Ukrainians want to come and fight. We'll fight them. We'll destroy them. The Ukrainians keep coming, fight them, destroy them. That's what this whole war militarily has been about. Not about liberation land or conquering land. It's not that.
No, I think that's right. The drawback, of course, there is that the the rest of Ukraine still remains a kind of essentially a de facto NATO entity. So that's you've still got all these people in Kiev and the NATO bloc within that. So that's in a way the backup plan for NATO. If we lose the Donbass, we lose the Donbass, we may lose Kherson, Zaporozhye. We still got 80% of Ukraine. That's going to be ours, and that's going to be NATO battlefront, NATO front and center, an armed aircraft carrier with its turrets pointing at Russia. I mean, that's the backup plan.
That's the downside of it, of the plan that I presented, right?
Now, so it's not changing the subject slightly. I mean, we were talking the other day about the sort of the essential kind of the totalitarian regime, so to speak, that the EU wants to impose on the European continent in preparation for this coming war with Russia. So we already, we got the various things like Germany wants to introduce conscription and so on, and then we got the hysteria about the drones, and then we have this Russian disinformation. Everywhere you go, there is this hybrid war. Every time a fire breaks out in an empty lot or an empty shopping mall, that's obviously Russia. So the EU, which talks a lot about the expansion. They want the expansion. There's a problem. They only really want to expand to bring in like-minded states. They so they're not, they're all for bringing in, say, Ukraine and Moldova. The problem they have is that they don't want to bring in any state that is going to start acting like Viktor Orban or Robert Fico. So the other day, the EU issued a warning that any new EU entrants must learn how to play the EU game and learn to do as they are told. And here is a story in the Financial Times explaining this new way of thinking. Um, yeah, where are we? Ridiculous. All right, okay, let me. Uh, not sure what happened there.
All right,
Okay.
while you're doing that, I'm going to address the question here. Why
Uh,
is Russia so insecure? Well, in the 19th century, Napoleon had a European coalition to invade Russia. In the 20th century, Hitler had a Western coalition, a European coalition to invade the Soviet Union. After the Cold War, NATO continued its expansion all the way to the Russian border. That would make me a little insecure. I think, it's not irrational, particularly when alternatives were presented.
right.
So, and the root cause is the lack of European security for everyone, not just Russia, for the
But
entire.
that's right. But it's very interesting that I mean, compare that with, say, the United States' approach, which regarded Cuba as as an enormous threat to U.S. security, regards Venezuela as a threat to its security. It used to regard Nicaragua as a
Little
threat
tiny
to security,
Nicaragua, right?
and
Yeah.
now Russia was facing a much bigger adversary. And just because if you're talking about the entire European continent under a NATO umbrella, which is what we're talking about, you are talking about something about much bigger than Russia. Because by population, by the size of its economy, by the totality of the armed forces and weapons at their disposal, this is much bigger than Russia. You're facing that. Who wouldn't be insecure? I mean, if you're worried about Nicaragua, they've got a Marxist Leninist regime in Nicaragua. That's a big threat to us. If you're worried about that, imagine how the Russians feel. And particularly, as it's not that long ago, the massive Wehrmacht invasion, it's still within the living memory of some living people. There are still people alive today who remember June the 22nd, 1941. Not many, but there's still people who are alive.
And the memory is very much alive.
Exactly. Exactly. Anyway,
I'm
so
sorry, I interrupted you, George.
yeah,
Go
no,
ahead.
no, yeah. So this is a story about um, this message that was issued to what is
The
this?
Trojan horses, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, exactly this Trojan horse, um, and for some reason it's acting up.
No, the essence of it is get your people in order, get
That's
their
right.
right think in order if you want to
That's
join
right.
us. Okay, you
That's
have
right.
to do the dirty business
That's right.
yourself.
Exactly. Exactly. Um, and there's a Trojan horses. The new EU member states could be put on probation. That's never a good sign when you're on probation.
But you start on probation. It's not like you're screwing up. We're going to put you on probation for a little while. No,
Yes,
it's almost if you were born in sin.
that's right.
Okay.
Yes. Well, you're right. I love that phrase, the Trojan horse. We don't want any stinking Trojan horses here. Um,
Even though the EU is a Trojan horse in all of these aspirates.
yes. Probation for a few years and excluded from the bloc in case of democratic backsliding.
Like canceling elections in Romania. Keep going.
That's right. No, the thing is that's not what they mean by democratic backsliding. No, no, no. Banning
But
political
it's a
parties.
European. It's the EU that is democratic.
Yes, exactly. No. That's affirming. That's democratic affirming. Under a proposal aimed at allaying concerns about new entrants emulating Hungary once they join. So they're talking about Hungary here. It's anyone who's trying to emulate. We're not going to have emulators of Hungary. Spurred
Yes,
by
well,
yeah.
2026 will be the year of Hungary in the EU. Mark my words.
Oh
Keep
yeah,
going.
yeah. They're going to pull out all the stops to get Orban out. Spurred by Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022 and a desire to bring the remaining Western Balkan countries into the fold, the European Commission has revived an enlargement process that was put on hold for more than a decade. Now, whenever they write this kind of stuff, I mean, what they're really getting at is they're not interested in these countries. I mean, they don't care about Serbia, Montenegro, and North Macedonia. The whole idea, they determine to eliminate any possibility whatsoever of any Russian influence in the
Right.
Balkans. Right? Russia has always been very interested in the Balkans. I mean, it was the defender of the Christians in the Balkans in the 19th century, and so that's really what they're talking about. We got to make sure there is no Russia, but they look at the Serbs and they don't trust the Serbs. They, however much Alexander Vucic, grovels before Brussels, they still don't trust them. They think that
Yeah, well,
there's still a lingering fondness for Russia there.
also, this is really the story is here. It's not the EU, it's NATO. NATO does not want any blank spaces or white spaces. They want
Right,
it all. Okay,
right,
they want it all. And that first of all, that justifies the continued existence of
right,
NATO. They're always in search of a problem, and they are the
right,
problem. And of course, to exclude any
right.
form of Russian influence whatsoever,
Right. That
even
exactly.
cultural.
Yes, that's right. Exactly. Um, and So this goes on, and here we have. But while supportive of the EU expanding its regional clout, several capitals are opposed to Ukraine, Moldova, and the Western Balkans, potentially flouting the bloc's rules on democracy, media freedom, and judicial independence once they join the bloc and aligning themselves with Russia. Um, so then he goes, and then here's the EU's enlargement chief, Marta Koch, talking to the FT. He says, I don't want to go down as the commissioner bringing in the Trojan horses who will be then active in 5, 10, or 15 years.
Well,
I'm
then
not.
why bring them in at all?
That's,
Why, if there's a risk, what's the point? Why you want?
well,
Why?
yeah, that's right. Yes. This
I,
is
I
the.
don't. I don't understand the logic of that. I mean, then wait 10 or 15 years and then maybe reconsider. What's the rush?
Well, that's exactly it. See, the only reason they want to bring them in is obviously to eliminate any lingering Russian influence. But the problem is, well, what if this blows up in our faces? What if they decide to be kind of pro Orban and not pro Kaya Kallas? So
Or said differently, what if they're pro peace?
right. Well,
And
that's
so, so the cost of it. This is what the EU is saying. The cost of entry, the cost of the ticket to the club is that you have to be prepared to go to war with Russia.
that's it.
That's the price of admission.
That's it. Yeah, no, that's right, and that's why they dress it up in all sorts of talk about democracy, democratic backsliding. They have no interest in that whatsoever. But this is how they sell themselves. Much of that sentiment is driven by the bloc's experience with Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who has repeatedly watered down Russia's sanctions, opposed any military aid to Ukraine, and has grown increasingly authoritarian back home, despite Brussels' attempt to pressure him by withholding EU funds.
Well,
Now, it's
what is
interesting when
what
they
is
say,
this?
well, this kind of authoritarianism at home, because of course there's no authoritarianism. But what they object to with him is that he does prioritize Hungarian business. So that what they whenever they talk about corruption and so on and so on, what they mean is EU businesses just simply will prevail over local businesses. In other words, and if local business, if a government prefers local businesses to EU businesses, then that's corruption. And that's been Orban's policy, which is well, I don't want Germans taking everything over. Basically, the whole place just run by Germany. So I want promoting local businesses. That gets
And you
called
know how that worked out the last time.
exactly, and that's the point. That's what they call this, authoritarianism. But it's part of Orban's kind of national state capitalism, which is he does make preferences for Hungarian business, which is kind of what you're supposed to do. But the EU obviously doesn't like it, and then he repeats to the media, well, it's authoritarianism, corruption, there's a lot of corruption, because we can't take the whole place over by essentially EU businesses everywhere. But that's what they when they talk about this authoritarianism. Where's the authoritarian? There's their media here, plenty of media here.
Well,
Don't
George
like
and
Orban.
me, George and I studied the Soviet Union while it existed, and they had something called democratic um,
Centralism.
centralism. Well, what does that mean? It
Right,
means the Politburo makes a decision, and then the decision goes then to the
right,
central committee,
right,
down to the oblast. That's what it is.
right.
It's a pyramid, and this is what
That's
Brussels is. Okay,
right,
the decisions are made there, and everybody below in the pyramid, as you go down, have to follow it. There's
right,
no democracy in that,
right.
none. And
No,
the commission who voted them in.
no. There's absolutely no democracy, and it's clear from all of this that they have no. This isn't about democracy. It's about, hey, towing the line. We don't want any Trojan horses. I like the idea of how many Trojan horses are there? There was only one Trojan horse. Many were different Trojan horses. And as Koch said, the commission was working on proposals that would include stronger rule of law safeguards and more efficient mechanisms to suspend rights or benefits if core values are violated.
Yes, remember, do not bite the hand that feeds you.
That's it. I love the core values. I mean, values is exactly what we're all really about values. Um, Estonia, is always in the business of essentially closing down or tearing up military cemeteries, Red Army military cemeteries, in violation of the agreements that they had signed with when they left the Soviet Union. No one ever says anything like that. No one ever brings that up as, hey, is that sort of values? I mean, you're doing something that's really very painful and obviously against your legal obligations. And these are international legal obligations. You don't mess around with military cemeteries. But apparently, that's still in keeping with our core values. Just like canceling elections is keeping with our core values. But this EU speak is this that they're always bringing up these values, and so, which they violate daily.
Yeah,
What
well, what does the European Union have to say about the destruction of the Orthodox Church in Ukraine?
exactly?
What do they say about
Exactly.
it? I haven't heard much.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wait,
Um,
freedom of of religion and
no,
religious
no, no.
expression.
That's right.
That
That's right.
is that a core value?
That's
Okay.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it doesn't seem to apply if it's the Russian Orthodox
No. No.
Church.
No. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Um, and so repeated breaches, and then it says this enlargement report states future accession treaties will need to contain stronger safeguards against backsliding on commitments taken in the accession negotiations, as well as requirements for the new member states to continue to safeguard and make irreversible their track record on the rule of law. So none of that really means anything. But what they mean is that anybody who comes in is going to have to sign some agreement. You will follow our foreign policy. You will impose sanctions on Russia, as we tell you to do. and pursue our foreign policy agenda. So, in the case of Serbia, you have to recognize the independence of Kosovo, irrespective of what your feelings are about Kosovo being an integral part of Serbia. You have to accept that, but we'll dress it up as rule of law, democratic backsliding, and blah blah blah.
Yeah,
That's
this is the same EU that created this problem. And how many years has it been since George? It's still unresolved. As a matter of fact, it's a flashpoint. Okay,
that's right.
again, they
That's
have to manage a problem that they created
That,
themselves.
that's right. That they created this problem for themselves, but they did that deliberately. So that essentially, they will always have this hanging over Serbia. So essentially, hey, you want to be a part of our club? You want to be a part of Europe? Well, you gotta.
Kiss,
Yeah,
kiss the ring.
that's it.
Kiss the
That's it.
ring.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, so they, one thing we haven't talked about in a while is what's going on in Gaza, and I mean, there's still supposedly a an agreement in place, but it's still we're on phase one. There's the question is when are we going to get on to phase two? And of course, phase two involves Israeli withdrawal, which hasn't it's not happening, and it involves the establishment of a Palestinian ruled by a kind of a committee of
Experts.
Palestinian technocrats or something
Yeah.
like that. It's not exactly a government, the Palestinian technocrats. And then, of course, the Board of Peace. But the it seems like the United States is moving towards uh, a the adoption of a UN Security Council resolution authorizing this Gaza plan, essentially, putting in place the Trump 20-point plan, and clearly, they're going to head towards the creation of it. Of course, when we looks at this, at least the drafts of the Security Council resolution that have that the media have seen, a lot of the issues remain unresolved. So the most complete draft that I've seen has been published on Axios, and here this is not working. Um, well, let me just find this again. Yeah, so that's the most a complete draft, um, and you can see that it's really not. It's just it's a, now at least they're moving towards that. I mean, I think that that's something that they are actually moving at least to some kind of resolution. And here's the welcoming there's a preamble, and it says determining the situation in Gaza Strip threatens the regional peace and security of neighboring states, noting prior revelation, endorses the comprehensive plan, acknowledges the parties have accepted it, and calls on all parties to implement it in its entirety in good faith, blah blah, and then
Okay.
welcomes the establishment of the Board of Peace as a transitional governance administration with international legal personality that will set the framework and coordinate funding for the redevelopment of Gaza pursuant to the comprehensive plan until such time as the Palestinian Authority has satisfactorily completed its reform program, the satisfaction of which shall be acceptable to the Board of Peace.
Yeah, this is very familiar, everyone. This goalpost that just move it out further and further. This is all aspirational. It's all
It's
aspirational.
aspirational, and the problem, of course, there is now the all of these sort of Arab states, include and Turkey, they all want the Palestinian Authority essentially to take over in Gaza. But basically, they're being told said no. I mean, Israel says no, and the United States is saying no. So therefore, they've agreed. All right, well, let's put that in abeyance, but we'll make a transition towards a rule by the Palestinian Authority. But the problem is that as we look at this resolution, it leaves it very vague, and the 20-point plan left vague. These reforms, what are these reforms that the Palestinian Authority needs to undertake before it'll be deemed suitable to take over in Gaza? And of course, I says, well, it's the Board of Peace that will decide. Well, the Board of Peace is going to be chaired by Trump. I'm not sure it's been determined yet who is going to be on this Board of Peace. Um,
Well, I mean, please, someone please explain to me, again, on the Palestinian Authority. I mean, Israel has the Palestinian Authority that it has always wanted. It's complicit. It's compliant. It has Palestinians policing, beating other Palestinians. I mean, that's what they always wanted. But they don't want any kind of self determination in Gaza among the
no,
Palestinians.
I think that's right.
It's something that no matter what, I mean, we'll think about it. Let's have a plan. This is exactly what we've heard for
Right,
decades.
right. No,
We're
but
not going to
yeah,
let that happen.
the problem is we're still going back to the same situation, which is, well, what is the alternative? The
Well,
alternative that this comes to,
that,
an
that's
end, and therefore Israel just continues the war. It's not like anyone's going to step in and fight Israel. So since
it,
we know
but
that, then
that
we have to decide
that's
what can we do to restrain and deal with Israel.
I- I- we're back to square one, George. We've been over this ground many times before. You know, uh, I'm willing to engage on this because it's the only game in town. Everyone, it's the only one. It's flawed, and maybe by design it is. There's no other game. There's no other process involved. It always gets down to is will Trump invest the political capital to have something like this come into being? Okay, where are these Palestinians going to come from? Are they in Gaza? Are they in the West Bank? Are they
Well,
diaspora?
I've read stories in Haaretz that they've got a list of Palestinians who are going to be on this as part of this committee of technocrats. So I don't know whether they're living in Gaza, whether they're Palestinians living abroad. I imagine they're probably living abroad. They're probably, if they're technocrats, I imagine they've got university degrees. They got their university degrees in Western universities. Um, but I mean, there is apparently a list of them. Uh, but
Well,
but
Judge, how long can we be floating in the air here? Okay, the sufficient amount of aid is not going in. The Israelis still control all the checkpoints. They're actually building infrastructure in what the 57% that they control. I mean, facts are being created on the ground while they're talking about different drafts of a resolution. The
Yeah, but
facts
that's
on
the
the
important point. I mean, once you've got a resolution in place, then you have to
yeah,
then implement the resolution.
once we get it in place, once we get it into place.
Right. No, I think that's exactly it. But nonetheless, they are. We did talk about this before. Will they they put a resolution in? Yeah, I think they're going to put a resolution in. The question then is, will the resolution have some kind of a timetable? Rather than just
Or
leave some vague
enforcement.
aspirations, but there has to be a
In-
timetable for implementation both of the technocrats and the Board of Peace and the Israeli withdrawals. I mean, that's the only way
yeah.
that resolution
Well,
will mean
will
anything.
that resolution serve up penalties for Israel for not following it?
No, well, that's the question, and here we do get into a very interesting question, because I think there is clearly a radical shift of mood in the United States and among Trump supporters on the very subject of Israel. So the old bromides about October the 7th, and the chanting death to America, and they all hate us and all this, that isn't working. And I think we talked yesterday, I think, about that event with Eric Trump, and here was some young student, just a young kid, who asked him about, well, what's Israel done for us? If it hasn't helped us at all, And
and I think it was the same kid. It might have been a different question, a different person, but in the same vein, why does why does an American president accept being treated this way?
yeah, I think it was the same kid.
That was yeah.
Yeah, no, that's right. And what was remarkable was that Eric Trump was unable to answer that question. He started floundering around and went back to familiar talking points. Oh, they hate us. This is
And his wife started talking about a
that's
nuclear
America, and so on. Yeah.
and a
So
nuclear Iran and all
yeah,
of
yeah,
this stuff.
exactly. Nuclear Iran and so on. So given that, again, this isn't, if this was, he went to Harvard or Yale, and this is the question that you got when you were in Harvard or Yale. Okay, fine, that's the kind of, this is in your home country. This is your own university. This is Trump country, and you're getting questions like this. So that's why. You would have to think that there is an incentive. That doesn't mean it's going to happen, but there is an incentive for Trump to stick with this plan. First of all, there's no great support for Israel, and you've made this your signature issue, which
Yep.
is you've brought peace to the Middle East. If this collapses and we're back to where we were just a few months ago, then that's it. You look like a kind of a busted flush. You're a dud. Your history. No one's interested in your claims anymore. So, there's an incentive for him to implement this and to apply pressure on Israel. Now, and this is exactly what some of these students are asking. And when they asked that question for J.D. Vance a few weeks ago, he said, "Well, we've applied real pressure on Israel. We've done this because Vance at least sees that. Yeah, that's what people are asking. Well, hey, we're the United States, and we're being run by this tiny little country. That doesn't make a lot of sense. What's going on here?" So Vance, at least he realized I have to answer this question. So there is an incentive for for Trump to apply pressure. I mean, he's done it before. So the question is then, will he continue with that?
Yeah, I mean, as long as we're, in phase one, how long can phase one last? And it seems to me
It
the
can't.
Israelis want phase one to last forever.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
um, I said it early on is that this is the Lebanization of this process. I mean, they would continue killing Gazans. We have the ceasefire with Lebanon completely. It's still rhetorically in place, but there's even talk now of um, um, uh, annexing territory. I mean, all of this talk, and that's why even young people is saying, what does this all mean? Okay, either we have the clout and the cards to play, or we don't. And if we don't play our cards, why don't we? And that's what people are asking.
Well, that's exactly what people are asking, and that's why if this does break down and Israel then launches, the same campaign as it's been waging, then I think it's going to be consequences are going to be quite serious for Israel. Israel can't go on doing this indefinitely. That's the point. I mean, it's like you can do this for a while, but ultimately numbers add up. Your country of 9 million. This is a huge country. Eventually, this huge country is going to get fed up. It's going to take time, but eventually, it's going to get fed up. There'll be, after Trump, there will be somebody who's going to say this. We can't go on like
Well,
this.
I mean, George,
It's not acceptable.
that bleeds into the raging civil war that's being played out in the Republican
Yeah,
Party. I
exactly.
mean,
Yeah,
and Trump is not immune to that because
yeah, yeah,
no matter how you want to cut it, everybody, the succession has started.
yeah.
Who will lead? Who will follow Trump? And people are jockeying left and right. And you have people like, the lunatic Mark Levin. I
Right,
mean, they're trying to set the contours of how that process is going to play out. And a lot of people are not playing ball with him.
right,
Okay, I mean,
right,
he is the worst possible spokesman. I mean, they just
right,
there's no self reflection here. I mean,
right.
you look like a monster, Mark Levine.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
and you're not interested in debate. You're
That's
interested in submission.
that's right.
Okay.
That's it. That's exactly right. But just let's look at a little bit more of this resolution, which is still being discussed among the Security Council members, and they're not all very happy with it. Um, it basically underscores the importance of full resumption of humanitarian aid in cooperation with the Board of Peace and Gaza Strip through coordinating organizations. And and here we have it authorizes member states participating in the Board of Peace and the Board of Peace to A, enter into such arrangements as may be necessary to achieve the objectives of the comprehensive plan, establish operational entities as necessary, with international legal personality, and then we have the implementation of the transitional governance administration, including the supervising and supporting of a Palestinian technocratic apolitical committee of competent Palestinians from the Strip. So it's a
Oh,
it is an interesting, I mean, this way of phrasing it. Do you mean a government? Well, I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah, yeah. See, that's my point. That's my point.
um,
We can have a board, but nothing like a government. Well, I mean, you come on. You have to have people on the ground that can start making independent decisions,
right,
given
that's right.
what they're dealt with. Okay, this is something that the Israelis will never accept. Okay, never.
No, no, that's they if it's left up to them, they won't accept it. Then that's why it's a question of, well, is it going to be left up to them? Um, and then reconstruction of Gaza, coordination of supporting delivery of public services and humanitarian assistance in Gaza to facilitate the movement of persons in and out of Gaza,
All
and
right.
then any additional. Now,
And where's
the
the
reason
point about will the blockade still be in place? Is that addressed at all?
that is not addressed at all, and Israel is not really specific. There's really very little mention of Israel in this draft plan. This is still a draft, but I don't see any mention really of Israel. It's all about the do this in Gaza, that in Gaza. There's no mention of Israel, and um, and then so there's a blah blah. There's the international stabilization force that obviously there has to be come in, and temporary deploy under unified command acceptable to the Board of Peace with forces.
Who's the unified command? Who are the players in a unified command?
Well, that's a very good question because I think that hasn't been determined. I mean, Turkey,
Well,
obviously,
George, at the end of the day, because we already hit the nail on the head here. No Egyptian or Indonesian or Madagascar. I don't know
Madagascar.
but how we call the people,
Oh, I
Madagascarians.
don't know how you call them. I
I
don't know,
picked the wrong one. I picked
Madagascar.
the wrong one. Trying
Yeah.
to be clever, and I fell flat on my face. But George and I've already mentioned this. No, third country. Okay, they're not going to go in there unless there's Americans there,
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's
because
right.
they're going to say they're going to start shooting at us.
That's right.
Okay, no one's going to shoot at the Americans.
Well,
Okay,
yeah, that's right. Now, of course, Turkey has volunteered. Yeah, we'll do it. We'll go in. Israel has already said no to Turkey. They've vetoed that. But because Turkey obviously has the resources to field a stabilization force, but Israel has vetoed that. Now,
and Turkey, everybody, and again, I don't know how much people know about it. Turkey is a builder country. They build stuff. I've
they do.
seen the stuff that they built in
That's,
Russia.
that's right.
Okay, they're good at building buildings. Okay,
Yeah, no, absolutely. Um, this question then is still, Israel has been making all kinds of claims that Hamas is in violation of the agreement. The Americans have not supported those claims. They have not supported all the thing. Oh, they haven't fulfilled returning the bodies. The Americans have said no, they fulfilled their claims. Then you've got these Hamas fighters who are behind Israeli lines. They're asking Israel to allow them through. Israel is saying no, but the Americans are insisting, no, you have to let them through. The question, there's obviously the confrontation between America and Israel. So then it really is going to be up to Trump to show that he can get his hands around this. We said this before over and over again. He's got to get his hands around this. If he doesn't, then there's no hope for it. But that's what stands in the way of this deal. And that's whether Trump is willing to do it. Just the kind of boilerplate that Eric Trump was spouting, that's kind of nonsense. But Trump knows, hey, this could unravel quite quickly, and that's why I think they're trying to push for this Security Council resolution. Otherwise, it will unravel very quickly.
Okay, well, given the very torturous language that you read us, George, okay, there's no meat on those bones at all, okay? This is chewing up time. This is running out the clock. And you make a good observation. Trump will react to accusations that Hamas is violating the ceasefire. But maybe I've missed it because there's so much going on. But Trump hasn't proactively grabbed it by.
No, he hasn't. I think
he hasn't. We have. Where's the address to the American people? We had a breakthrough with the ceasefire in phase one. Now we must push forward. Okay, and I invite the international. We don't see anything like that.
No. I think that's a very. You're absolutely right. That's a very serious issue that he hasn't done this. But it is the thing. I think I saw a moment ago. Somebody said, "Oh, it's all about the Jewish billionaires, and they always prevail." But that isn't really true. I mean, they didn't prevail in New York City. They didn't want Mamdani to win, and they didn't prevail. I mean, and we've had time and time again where even U.S. presidents saying we've had enough, we're just not doing anything with Israel. They haven't pursued it consistently. So and U.S. presidents who have defied Jewish billionaires, the Jewish lobby, and everything else, they said no, we're going to pursue like George H.W. Bush did. So it can be done if you have a mind to do it.
If you have leadership skills,
Yeah.
you have to have strong leadership skills, and you have to have your own agenda, your own plan. Well, what do you want to accomplish here? Instead of doing it, we're going to just do it on the fly. All we have to do is get through this news cycle. That's a recipe for disaster. Okay.
Yeah.
Because again, this is the only game in town. It's a pretty flawed one here. But if it's going to have any kind of a modicum of success, you've got to put your arms around this thing and hug it to death. Okay. And up until then, the blockade is still in place. The aid is not getting in. Israel has its fifth column thugs messing up everything inside of Gaza. And winter's coming. Most of these people are living outside now.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's right. Anyway, let's take a look at some of our commenters on our locals board page. These are people who worry about the fate of the dogs, worry that they work so hard and that they're unremunerated. So thank you very much to our locals community. And the first question is from Stone River. Thank you, Stone River. It says, do you think the voters in Europe will ever wake up from their sleepwalking into totalitarian dystopia? What could trigger that? And how would it play out? It's a very good question. It's hard exactly to understand why the European voters continue to support policies that are obviously contrary to their interests. I think there's such a democracy deficit now in so there's so little accountability that I think Europeans are just kind of giving up on really fighting back on anything, whether it's on any issue at all, with like the 2008 crash and the sovereign debt crisis of 2010-11, the COVID, energy policy, Russia, Ukraine. Now this militarization is over and over again on every issue. Basically, I mean, the voters think one thing, and the government thinks something else. So I don't see any real hope in Europe. I mean, this democracy deficit now just seems to be completely prevails. There's, I think, more hope in the United States. There's always been, I think, more hope in the United States. I think there's a little bit more accountability. But in Europe, I don't see any hope.
Yeah, I mean, but we shouldn't be surprised because the entire Europe EU project had democracy only as an afterthought. I mean,
No,
the EU can function just fine without democracy.
right?
Matter of fact,
Yeah,
democracy is an annoyance. Okay,
that's right.
because this is the professional managerial class with their neoliberal ideology. They don't want the input of people. They've already decided what needs to be done, and they hide behind values and these slogans. And plus, with the information space, is I mean, it's being shrunk more and more. I mean, we did a video yesterday. They want a snitch culture now
Yeah,
in Europe.
right,
Okay, so why stick your head out? Because there's the law isn't going to protect you.
right,
Okay,
right.
the political parties we talked about the possible fate of the alternative for Germany, which is pretty grim
Yeah,
moving forward for them.
that,
Yeah, I
that,
mean, um, is it sleepwalking or is it just a coma? I mean, because you can wake up from sleepwalking, but when you're in a coma, well, you could be in a coma for a very long time.
Well, it could be, that's right. I should have added also immigration into the mix. It's another issue that Europe's elites have pursued, and again, there's almost no democratic accountability. So we have this Ursula von der Leyen making all of her ridiculous assertions, and it just doesn't seem to be any movement within Europe to point out the most obvious. She has no democratic legitimacy. She's just nothing. She's a bureaucrat. Who is this bureaucrat ordering, apparent democracies to do this or that or the other? And it's just extraordinary. I mean, here's Kaya Kallas. The worst possible person, worst possible human being in Europe to be in charge of EU foreign policy. I mean, anybody would say, how can you have? It's like, I mean, like it's having like having John McCain as president. I mean, it's like the American people have said, no, we don't. However much they didn't think much of the neophyte Obama, they said absolutely no way are we going to have someone like John McCain as president. So there's something like that should have happened in Europe. There's no way we can have Kaya Kallas representing us on the world stage, and yet it just continues.
And the juxtaposition is that there is a democratically elected leader that is being persecuted by Brussels, and that's Viktor Orban.
That's right. That's exactly. So I don't see any real movement to stop this, to be honest. And as I say, Orban's going to have a difficult re-election fight next year. He's underwater in the polls. He could still win, but it's not a done deal. He knows that it's going to be a tricky one. Anyway, thank you so much, the Stone River. Cynthia, always very good to see you, Cynthia. Thank you so much, Cynthia. And Cynthia says Trump is a cherry picking hypocrite of the highest order. Okay, that's good. As he's never said a single word about all of the Christians being slaughtered by order of his butchering buddy in Israel and his head chopping friend in Syria. Who's visiting the White House today. There's Giuliani is coming I'm surprised he's not doing a joint address to Congress, as a kind of the hero of the Middle East, head chopping friend in Syria. He's also kept quiet about his flunky friend Zelensky jailing Christian monks. But the same thing is happening to Christians in Nigeria. Yet Trump is so outraged about it that he wants to go there in with guns blazing and save Christians from these thuggish terrorists. Do you want to say something on that, Peter? Or
No lies detected.
there's no lies detector. No, you're absolutely right, Cynthia. It's always been very the Americans highly selective in their championing of Christians. I remember during the 1990s, the U.S. administration, and bipartisan. This is bipartisan. This wasn't just, oh, well, of the Democrats. The U.S. administration supported Islamists in Bosnia and Herzegovina who were chopping the heads of Christians, Serb Christians, and of course, Croat Catholics as well. So they were doing that. They were doing something very similar in Chechnya, where again, the United States was supporting the worst kind of jihadi thugs, gangsters, head choppers in Chechnya against Orthodox Christian Russians. You're right. You talk about the Christians in the West Bank and Gaza. I mean, all this has been recorded. Even the awful Huckabee was forced
Yeah.
to acknowledge, hey, we got Israel is just destroying Christian churches. I'm supposed to be a pastor. I'm supposed to be appalled by these kinds of things. So he rebuked Israel. That rebuke lasted all of about 30 minutes. We did a podcast on that, but so he rebuked that. And then you're absolutely right about Zelensky and what they're doing to the Ukrainian Orthodox Church in Ukraine. One could also add to the mix Azerbaijan, kind of driving out Armenian Christians from Nagorno Karabakh, and of course, the guy who also enjoyed the hospitality of the White House, Pashinyan. Pashinyan is jailing archbishops.
Yeah.
These are the oldest Christian community in the world. He's jailing archbishops. I mean, you can't get any worse than that, jailing archbishops. And that's okay by Trump. So one side of the table you have Azerbaijanis, driving out Christians, and then on the other side of the table, someone who's jailing archbishops. But how all of a sudden they've seized on Nigeria, and in particular, the Nigerian case is particularly fake because people who know about Nigeria say the government itself is not pursuing an anti-Christian campaign, and this is Boko Haram. This is these Islamists who are doing this, but they're also killing Muslims. So
They're
yes,
also
a
killing
lot of
Muslims.
Christians, but they're also killing Muslims. But the government has said we welcome help. We welcome your help if you want to take on
Well,
both.
where did this all come from? The destruction
Exactly.
of Libya. Okay.
Exactly. All of that came from the destruction of Libya, where again Christians were protected, as were Christians protected in Syria under Assad. So that and yet, as you say, they're welcoming
Well,
Jolani.
and then there's according to, I think it was Smoltrich, there's that great Israeli or Jewish tradition of spitting on Christians.
Yes, great. Yes, that's a very an ancient
An
and
ancient, apparently an ancient rite. Okay, well, I
the,
can tell you that Palestine was under control of the Ottoman Turks for a very long time. I don't think they tolerate being spat at.
I don't think so. And so, yeah, all of this is you're absolutely right. And this is so that's why it's so fake and phony. But what's also interesting is how this Nigerian thing has been seized on in a very fake, phony, fraudulent way. Like Bill Maher. Bill Maher was basically a strong Israel supporter, basically an ardent Israel supporter. He suddenly, on his show, he said, "Well, you talk about genocide. There's a genocide going on in Nigeria. There's a genocide. That's real genocide. Not in Gaza. That's real genocide." So suddenly, oh, it's a wonderful distraction. Oh, hey, why?
Exactly.
A real genocide. We're talking about what's going on with the Christians. What the hell? Bill Maher couldn't care less about Christians. Absolutely couldn't. Never given a damn about Christians
Well,
throughout.
he's an atheist Jew, right? He's an
Exactly,
atheist.
atheist Jew, and he's never given a damn about them. But he seized on this as a way of, well, let's stop talking about Gaza. This is the real genocide. But the point is, a genocide, as I've always said, genocide, you have to have intent. That's the key to genocide. You have to show intent. Is there an intent on the part of the Nigerian government, as opposed to Boko Haram? It's a different, a part on the on the part of the Nigerian government to wipe out the Christian population of Nigeria. I haven't seen it. And people who know about it say, "Hey, there are Christians within the Nigerian government. So there are Muslims and there are Christians within the Nigerian government. So there's no evidence of an intent
What,
to
George?
wipe out Christians."
What do you bet? Remember, Haskell, the CIA director, told. And this goes back to the strip mall affair. It's killing ducks. Ducks are and somebody probably said something in passing to Trump about the attack on Christians, and he just thought, oh, I can get a win out of this, okay?
Yeah.
And guns a blazing.
Yep.
I mean, as far as I know, his own State Department hasn't issued a report on this or something. I mean, who whispered this into his ear?
That's right.
It's
Yes.
just weird.
It's very weird. It's kind of let's put it this way, not exactly in keeping with America first. I mean, so now you're planning on a military intervention. Nigeria, big country. It's not, that isn't going to be an easy military
Well,
undertaking.
unless somebody said, I know a way to get this Nigerian oil.
But I suppose
I don't know. Maybe.
anyway, then Cynthia goes on. So Trump may be feigning strong support for Nigerian Christians to court the black vote. I don't see that one. To be honest, I don't think the black vote would be moved by what's going on in Nigeria, because either way you're going to be killing one set of Nigerians in order to save another set of Nigerians. So I don't think the blacks are going to be terribly moved by that. I mean, I think the black, he's made some inroads in the black vote, but that's usually on based on domestic issues
And
and
it's black men.
black men, and I think black men who I think like him. I mean,
Yeah,
there's something.
they like an alpha male. That's
Exactly. They like, yeah, exactly. He has a swagger that the black men respond to. You're absolutely right. Black women do not really respond to him. And so I don't think this is going to get him.
Well, there was a
Like,
question asked of me. How many bow ties do I have? I don't know. I have a lot of bow ties. When it comes around, you have to remember here where I live, it's New Year's that's the big holiday, not necessarily Christmas, though it is picked up in tempo, mostly for consumerism. But I always saw my birthday and on New Year's, I say, if you're gonna I don't want any gifts, don't need any gifts. I don't have a lot of space, but I'll take a bow tie. So I get bow ties as gifts very often, which I like.
do you have difficulties tying a bow tie? By the way.
No, I can. It's helpful to look into the mirror, okay, just to make sure you get the both sides even. But
Mm,
you do it enough, it's automatic. You don't. It's reflex. It's reflex. Okay.
great. All right. Yeah, I've never had worn bow ties, and so I have no idea how to tie a bow tie. I think
I wear a bow tie every day. Every day.
yeah, I think when I once I went to a couple of times I've been to black tie affairs. I had the clip on. I got a clip on.
They're not called clip-ons. They're called pre-tied. Okay. I hate that phrase. Clip-ons. Okay. They're pre-tied.
Why do you hate the phrase?
I think
Aren't they
it's
clip?
demeaning. Okay. Hang on. Here we go. Where do I have them here?
Um, but anyway, Cynthia, just to finish off a note, yeah, but nearly half, after all, nearly half of the black
Let's just
Christians.
say, let's just say I have lots of bow ties.
Okay.
Lots and lots and lots.
Um, so after all, nearly half of black Christians identify as evangelicals. Yes, yet most prefer to be called born again, as evangelicals are strongly associated with white Christians. But the zeal for that's a lot. There's zeal. Um, uh, the zeal for Trump is just as strong. Anyway, Trump lost some support from white evangelicals thanks to Charlie Kirk and his anti-Zionist rhetoric. So he's not going to let that happen to black born again supporters. Yeah, but the evangelicals, I think, I don't see that they have really anywhere much to go to. I mean, I guess they can just simply sit on their hands if they're unhappy with Trump, they're not going to go to the Democrats. I mean, that's I think that's lost forever. So I think that's just an issue where they just might
Well,
sit.
I mean, it's not a torrent yet. It's not a tsunami, but there are more and more evangelical Christians are questioning the U.S. relationship with Israel. It's finally beginning to happen. They're
Right. No,
starting because I
I
mean, if you do believe in the gospel, then the power arrangement in Palestine favors one side, the oppressed.
right. That's right. And as I said, there was always going to come a moment. And I think, Israel has always been feared. This is the issue that Israel has always feared. This is the reason for APAC. This is the reason why so much money is poured into American politics. There's always the fear that American politicians are going to say, "What's Israel done for us? I mean, aren't we supposed to be answerable to our voters?" Now, of course, so far, most politicians have said, "No, we're not answerable to our voters. We're answerable to our donors. Our donors are much more important than our voters," and that can go on for some time, but eventually, it has to prevail that the voters are more important. And that's why I think Israel has always been afraid of this, that there will be a moment then American politicians will come along. Buchanan did that. Ron Paul has done that. Trump has at various times suggested that, hey, I'm supposed to be the president of the American people, not of Israel. And that's the deep seated fear of Israeli politicians. That's why they always, Israeli leaders do back down. When the American president really gets firm, they have to back down. They realize, hey, we can't take this any further. I mean, so, but they push. It's like a spoiled child. They can push and push and push and get their way on a lot of things. As long as an indulgent parent goes on indulging them.
No lies detected.
No lies. Steve K9 says, well, which is what I addressed earlier, the U.S. is not being run by a tiny little country. It is run by Jewish billionaires. I mean, that's up to a point true. But they
Well,
also,
we need to parse our words. This goes back to the discussion that Tucker had with Nick Fuentes. Is that I don't like this Jewish billionaire thing. It's not precise. What was more precise is that Zionists, okay, and that you take the Jew or Christian or Gentile out of the equation because it's not a problem with Jews. It's a problem with people that have a Zionist messianic world view. Okay, there are far more Christian Zionists in America than Jews. Okay, so let's be precise with our language.
no, I think that's right, and I think that even when it comes to the Jewish billionaires, you can certainly argue, they're all pernicious, like most billionaires, their influence is pernicious, but they're not all of a piece when it comes to the subject of Israel. For instance, George Soros has never been a friend of Israel. I mean, certainly Israeli leaders hate Soros, and yeah, he uses his money for all sorts of malevolent, pernicious things, but not really for Israel. That's just not his thing. So it's not all of a piece. And as I say, the Bill Ackman intervened, in a very big way in the election in New York, as did
And he
Bloomberg.
failed.
And he failed. Bloomberg and Bill Ackman, these are big time billionaires, big time Zionists, and they failed. So it's not it's not a done
Well,
deal.
we're almost out of time, and on my program tomorrow, the title of is Tucker 2028. Okay, and I think everybody knows where we're going. I think you could take a look at what we talked about yesterday. My conversation with George yesterday inspired this
Right,
idea for my program. Okay,
right.
so do you think they have the capital, they have organizations, they have media platforms? Will they be able to destroy Tucker Carlson? I wouldn't count on it at
I
all.
mean, yeah, no, I absolutely, and I think that's where this is the difference between now and in the Bill Buckley era when you could do that.
Exactly.
You could just
They got
simply
rid of
wipe
Pat
somebody out.
Buchanan.
Yeah, yeah.
They got rid of Pat Buchanan. They're not going to be able to
That's
do it this
right.
time.
That you can't do it. I mean, Tucker Carlson is just this huge, huge platform. I mean, how many people have already watched that
Oh, geez.
interview with Fuentes? I think 5, 6, 7 million. I think it's something. It's
I
an
mean,
amazing number.
when I was watching it, it would go. It wouldn't be. The counter wouldn't go one. 5, 7. It was going like 1,500, 2,000, 3. When I was watching it.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's just amazing. Anyway, Peter, our time is up. So thank you very much, everybody who joined us. Thank you very much for these very, very interesting questions and
And
comments.
don't forget the tip box
And
jar. You
exactly,
saw
thank
the
you.
slides. You saw the slides. I didn't do that. George did it.
Yeah,
Okay.
the slides, and and then you've got the dogs. That's like, yeah, yeah. That money belongs to us. And we're not sharing it. So please, anything you have into the tip jar. Those who have contributed today, really appreciate you. Thank you so much for your generosity. We will be back on our joint live stream same time next Monday, and please join me tomorrow on Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern time for my solo. Until then, all the best. Bye bye.